Ahoy, mateys! Welcome to Podcasts of the Caribbean, a podcast covering the world of Pirates of the Caribbean, from the theme parks to the movies and everything in between. My name is Justin Helmer, and I will be your host on this voyage through the Caribbean. It'd be too late to alter course now, mateys. Hello, and welcome back to Podcasts of the Caribbean. This is episode 51, and today we are beginning a new adventure on the podcast as we begin to cover the Legends of the Brethren Court book series. There are 5 books in total to cover, and this is a very fun series that is essentially a sequel series to the Young Jack Sparrow books. On the last episode, we covered Forgotten and Cancelled Pirates Media, and you should definitely go listen to that episode if you haven't already. I had a lot of fun doing that one. But in that episode, I mentioned that John from the Young Jack Sparrow series will return in Legends of the Brethren Court. And throughout the course of this series, we will see other characters from the Young Jack Sparrow series return as well. I won't spoil who they are, but it is super exciting. But before we begin, let's cover some background info on the series. So, Legends of the Brethren Court is written by Rob Kidd, which, if you remember, is the pseudonym for a bunch of Disney press authors. That's the main reason why this series is a sequel, essentially, to Young Jack Sparrow, as the same authors wrote this series. However, unlike the Young Jack Sparrow series, I believe only one author wrote the 5 books in this series, and that is Toy T. Sutherland, who wrote and co-wrote some of the Young Jack Sparrow books. This series is kind of interesting as it is not as well known as the Young Jack Sparrow series, and another thing to note is that these books are about 100 or so pages longer than the Young Jack Sparrow books, coming in at an average of around 200 to 250 pages per book. The first book in the series, named The Caribbean, which we are covering today, was released on October 14th, 2008, which is about a year and a half after At World's End. You might be able to see where I'm going with this. The Young Jack Sparrow series took advantage of the current release and popularity of POTC during 2006 and 2007, since that series started a few months before Dead Man's Chest released. That series didn't wrap up until the end of July 2008, and this series kicked off a few months after. But as we saw with the tail end of the Young Jack Sparrow series, the demand died down for the last few books, resulting in lower volumes of printed copies. This series suffered the same plight, but I don't think it ever hit the same level that Young Jack Sparrow did. This series was originally meant to be 6 books, but the 5th book was cancelled, so the original plans for books 5 and 6 were smashed into one, resulting in the final book of the series being pretty rushed and, in my opinion, not really the best conclusion. I'm still thankful we got a conclusion, but it came very late. This series never really found the audience it was looking for, given that these are probably the most forgotten about Pirates books out there. Just to give an example, the final book in this series was never actually published physically. The first 4 books you can get print copies or digital copies, but the final book is only available in digital form. It was never printed. And that book didn't get released until 3 years after its original intended release date. It was set to release in November 2009, but it was delayed and dropped with 0 fanfare or announcement in the summer of 2012. So, yeah, Disney did their best to try and keep Pirates of the Caribbean alive after At World's End, but the truth of it is, the popularity slowly died down, and Disney probably just lost interest in trying to keep all this extra content going. Obviously, they still wanted more movies, but it was clear that the younger audience these books were written for just didn't want to engage with them, and that is kind of sad. I wonder if this is also the reason behind the low volume of printed copies of The Price of Freedom, since that, of course, was being worked on during this time as well. But thankfully, this series got its conclusion, so let's be happy about that. But with all that background information out of the way, let's dive into Book 1 of Legends of the Brethren Court, The Caribbean. Okay, so the book starts out with a prologue, and we find ourselves in a dark and mysterious jungle. Deep in the jungle, there is a European-esque building that is inhabited by the villain of this book series, the mysterious and dangerous Shadow Lord. We come to find out that the Shadow Lord is an alchemist with incredible power, and by twisting the ring on his finger, an image appears in the cauldron he's looking into. We see the Shadow Lord's army has desecrated a fort, leaving smoldering fires and absolutely no one alive. Bodies are strewn about the fort, and the army of shadows have completely disappeared, leaving no trace of them ever being there. The army of shadows are actually just that. They're shadows that take the form of everyday objects from around the area. So they take hold of these objects like barrels, chests, cannons, rope, swords, and all kinds of things, and amalgamate them together into essentially unkillable forces. This is how the Shadow Lord plans to enact his revenge on the pirate lords. But we see the Shadow Lord doesn't have full control over his army of shadows, as they also happen to destroy his ship in the process of the attack on Panama. The shadows rip the ship apart to manifest more shadow warriors made out of parts of the ship. We see that the Shadow Lord is getting ready for the day where he will strike back against the pirate lords, and this day, the Day of Shadow, will occur in just over 2 months. Why does the Shadow Lord have a vendetta against the pirate lords? Well, let's just say the Shadow Lord, whoever he is, as we don't know that yet, is not very well liked among the pirates. They teased and chastised him as being a buffoon and a disgrace to pirates everywhere, and that animosity fueled his hatred for them. The source of the Shadow Lord's power is the ring that he wears, as that is how he summons his shadow army and also how he makes them disappear. But we see the Shadow Lord makes his way over to the fireplace in this building, and he pulls up one of the floorboards to reveal a hidden chest. He opens it up and finds it is empty, as all 7 vials of the shadow gold that were kept inside are gone. Someone stole them from him, and we see the shadow gold, as it's called, is made out of a combination of liquid gold and orichalcum, and there is apparently no more orichalcum left anywhere in the world, meaning that no more shadow gold can be made. These vials help give the Shadow Lord more power, and he is enraged that someone stole them. But he has no idea who might have stolen them, as they were a complete secret to him alone. But he deduces it must have been the pirate lord somehow, and his anger toward them only increases, including toward the one he hates the most, none other than Captain Jack Sparrow himself. We'll learn more about the Shadow Lord later on, but we now go aboard the Black Pearl into Chapter 1 and meet up once again with Jack Sparrow. This series is set after The Price of Freedom, although there won't really be any references to anything from that book since they're technically separate, despite them fitting into the timeline in order. Jack is already the Pirate Lord of the Caribbean, which is interesting as he wasn't a Pirate Lord yet at the end of The Price of Freedom. If you listen to episode 50 of the podcast, you can learn a bit about the plans for a potential sequel to The Price of Freedom, which would have covered how Jack became a Pirate Lord. I should also mention that since this is a sequel to Young Jack Sparrow, Jack will be back to behaving how he was portrayed in that series. He will be a bit more goofy here, which of course is of stark contrast to his serious nature throughout the course of The Price of Freedom. I just wanted to get that out there if you were wondering why Jack is acting like a goofball again. It's definitely a hard turn from his behavior in The Price of Freedom, that's for sure. But we see Jack is trying to find the right angle to set his hat on his head, but he is interrupted by his new first mate, who of course happens to be none other than Hector Barbossa himself. We are going to be getting a lot of Barbossa content throughout this series, so Barbossa fans, rejoice. Barbossa is fed up already with Jack not answering him, so he pokes Jack in the ribs with his pistol, getting his attention. Jack tells him he didn't answer because Barbossa didn't address him as captain, which infuriates Barbossa. Throughout this series, it sets the stage for Barbossa to, of course, mutiny against Jack. So most of the time, Barbossa is scheming behind Jack's back and trying to set his plans in motion. We see the Black Pearl is heading to Tortuga to pick up a new crew, as most of the previous crew left after the last treasure hunt ended in, well, not finding any treasure. This book also mentions here that Jack still has 13 years before Davy Jones gets his soul, so this must be only months after The Price of Freedom if I had to guess. If you want a quick connection, we can say that Jack went to Shipwreck Cove at the end of The Price of Freedom, which he did, and told them he dealt with the rogue pirates. Maybe that was what got him the title of Pirate Lord, maybe Esmeralda gave it to him, or maybe she died. We of course don't know that. But there, Jack probably picked up Barbossa as his first mate, and they set out on their first, albeit unsuccessful, expedition. Barbossa is of course now the Pirate Lord of the Caspian Sea, which occurred in The Price of Freedom. But back to the book, we see Barbossa is already scheming against Jack, saying that he will stay with the Pearl while Jack goes ashore to recruit a crew. Jack, of course, tells him no, and he is needed to help select the best pirates to join them. But the Pearl docks at Tortuga, and as they descend the gangplank, Jack sees an old friend in the harbor. So let's see who it is. But Jack was distracted by the sight of a familiar face at the end of the dock. "Bill!" he cried in delight, dashing up to his old friend. "Billy Turner, is that really you?" "Oh, hello, Jack," Billy said in his usual serious way. "I wondered if I would see you here sooner or later." "But this is marvelous!" Jack exclaimed, seizing Bill's hand and pumping it up and down. "This is your lucky day, old friend. It just so happens that due to surprising and unforeseen circumstances entirely beyond my control, there is a position available on my crew." One of Jack's crew stormed past, flinging an end of a rope at Jack. "Tie up your own cursed ship," he snapped. "I'm off to find a ship whose captain ain't barmy as a seagull." "Perhaps more than one position, then," Jack amended, throwing his arm around Bill's shoulder. "Know anyone else who might want to join us? Perchance that fellow we once sailed with? What was his name? Oh, yes. How about you?" "You?" Billy asked, perplexed. He had known Jack for years, but couldn't always understand his quick wit. Then Bill's curious expression deflated upon realizing what Jack was suggesting. "Oh, you, not you. Not you, me. I mean, you want me to join your crew." "Thanks, Jack. Flattered," Billy said, pulling himself away from Jack. "But I'm not looking for work. I'm just trying to get home." "But Billy, lad," Jack protested, "take a look at my ship." He gestured grandiosely toward the Pearl. "The Black Pearl, Billy. Remember the stories we used to hear about the fastest ship in the world? This is it, but it's even faster now." "Not faster than Davy Jones' ship, the Flying Dutchman," Billy said gloomily. "Pfft," Jack said with a dismissive wave. "Unfair advantage. Extra supernatural, dead crew, all that. Also, did you notice my hat? Isn't it excellent? Come on, Bill, we're going to have grand adventures." "Pirate adventures, you mean," Bill said. "No thanks, Jack. I have responsibilities now." "Yes," Jack said disapprovingly, narrowing his coal-lined eyes. "And how is the little wife?" "She's doing very well, Jack," Bill said. "I know she'd love for you to visit. And then you can meet our son." "Your what?" Jack said, cupping his hand behind his ear. "Come again?" "Our son, Jack. We have a baby boy." "Oh," said Jack with little interest. He looked around the bustling wharf as if hoping something would happen to change the subject. Then a thought occurred to him. "Did you name him Jack by any chance?" Bill chuckled. "I'm afraid not, Jack. He's a William, like me." "Oh," Jack said, losing interest again. "I just thought you might want to name him after your mentor and role model, the greatest pirate captain of the Caribbean. Someone who's always been a friend to you and that bonny lass of yours. No, that's all right." He paused. "Saved your lives on a number of occasions, I did." Jack turned the dagger a little more. "Oh, well, maybe the next one?" he said hopefully. "Maybe," Bill agreed with a smile. "Well, William shouldn't stop you from having a bit of an adventure before going home," Jack said. "Wouldn't you like to take some pirate gold back to your baby who is not named Jack?" "I left to make my fortune on a merchant ship," Bill said glumly, "but we were attacked by Spanish pirates not far from here, and they stole the ship. I've been stranded on Tortuga ever since." "Spanish pirates," Jack scoffed. "Vagabonds and lummoxes. What are they doing in our Caribbean, I'd like to know? Don't they have their own sea to pillage and plunder? Seems like all you hear about nowadays are Spanish pirates, when people really should be talking about me instead." "Well, they're none too friendly, that's for certain," Bill said. "You know what you should do?" Jack said sagely. "You should stash that kid of yours in an orphanage, or a monastery. Happens to boys all the time, and lots of them grow up to be terrific pirates. Then you and the missus can come on a little jaunt with me, liberate some treasure, get some fresh sea air, maybe even an excellent hat of your own. The kid'll be there when you get back. Trust me, he won't even notice you're gone." "No, Jack," Bill said firmly. "Freedom!" Jack cried, waving his arms madly. "The wind in your hair, rum, salty wenches, sea air." He paused, thinking for a minute. "Did I mention rum?" "I'm going home," Bill insisted, setting his jaw. "That's all I want, to get back home." Jack eyed him shrewdly from head to toe. A plan was forming in his mind. A plan to keep Billy with him long enough to persuade him to join the Pearl. "Home, eh?" he said. "And where is home these days?" "North Carolina," Bill said, tipping his head toward the north. "Not many boats going all that way, I'm afraid." Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully, twisting the braids of his beard. He said. "Tell you what, Billy, my friend. Why don't we give you a lift?" Bill eyed him with deep suspicion. "All the way to North Carolina?" "Why not?" Jack said, spreading his hands. "We've got nowhere else to be. We might as well venture up the coast and see how things are. Then we can drop you off and be on our merry way, eh?" "And what do you get out of it?" Bill asked. Jack looked injured. He pressed one hand to his heart and had the most innocent expression on his face. "Why, I get to spend some quality time with one of my very good friends, he said. Bill still looked dubious. And I hear there's treasure in the Carolina Islands, Jack tried. Ah, Bill said, relaxing. Well, that makes more sense. If you're sure you'd be going that way anyway. Of course, Jack said. With the speed of my fine ship, we'll have you home in no time at all. He smiled, showing all his teeth. It had been a very long time since Bill had seen Jack. He'd forgotten what that smile meant, that Jack might not exactly be telling the whole truth. Thanks, Jack, Bill said with a tight-forced grin. I appreciate it. We just had to stop by the tavern and pick up a few pirates before we go, Jack said. Barbossa, he yelled. He turned and saw his first mate frozen halfway up the gangplank, as if he'd been sneaking back on board. Come on, Hector, stop dawdling, Jack called. What's taking you so long? We have pirates to recruit. Clapping Bill on the back, he steered his friend into the crowd. With a muttered curse, Barbossa trailed behind them up the hill to the faithful bride. Alright, so we see the return of good old Billy Turner, who of course is older now than the last time we saw him at the end of the Young Jack Sparrow series. And if you listened to the episode covering the tale of Billy Turner, we talked about the interesting theories surrounding the identity of Will Turner's mother. Now we see here that Will has already been born, and Billy is trying to get back to him and his wife. Now if you want a full breakdown of this theory, go and listen to the end of the Tale of Billy Turner episode. But to be brief, we see that Jack knows whoever Billy's wife is. And throughout all the evidence presented in the Pirates books, Billy's wife is theorized to be none other than Arabella Smith, who of course fell in love with Billy at the end of the Young Jack Sparrow series. We also saw them thinking about having a kid back then too, and the fact that Jack knows whoever Billy's wife is makes this even more plausible. It is left, however, unconfirmed if Arabella is indeed Will's mom or not, but she is the most likely candidate. Billy is trying to get back home to Will and Arabella, and they are currently living in North Carolina. Billy has given up on pirating at this point, but Jack promises him that he'll take him back home. Billy is left with no choice but to trust Jack here, but he knows Jack isn't telling the whole truth. Anyway, Jack, Bill, and Barbossa head to the faithful bride, but a mysterious person sneaks his way onto the Black Pearl and hides deep within the dark hold of the ship. We'll come back to this later. But once the trio makes it into the faithful bride, Jack asks if anyone is interested in joining the crew of the Black Pearl. One of the pirates yells, "Why, is Villanueva hiring?" And they all start laughing. Barbossa thinks this is a complete waste of time and tells them they should go somewhere else, but Jack sees a pirate coming over to him. This guy is tripping over every single possible thing he can trip over. He is a mess, and Barbossa says he's likely to fall overboard the moment the ship moves. Jack asks what makes him think he is worthy to crew the Black Pearl, and this guy, named Catastrophe Shane, doesn't really have a good answer to that. But Jack needs all the help he can get, so he hires Shane on enthusiasm alone. Barbossa is already so over it, which is absolutely hilarious. But the next guy walks up to Jack, and I'm going to read this part. Just keep it in the back of your mind. I won't say anything, but it's important later on. Another stranger sidled up as Shane went to stand behind Billy. This one was older and quite a bit more rotund, with a long, drooping fat brown mustache. He winked a lot as he talked, and constantly fiddled with his hands, but he seemed friendly, a little too friendly for a pirate. But Jack and his nascent crew couldn't exactly be picky. "I'm Henry," he said, introducing himself. "Are you really the great Captain Jack Sparrow?" "I most certainly am," Jack said, beaming again. "Unless he owes you money, in which case, no, never heard of him." "I've heard so much about you," Henry said. "Aren't you one of the youngest pirate lords the Brethren Court has ever had?" Jack pretended to blush. "Well, I don't like to brag," he said. Then he steadied himself. "Yes, I'm the youngest captain ever to become a pirate lord." "Even from the Second Court?" Henry asked. "What about Morgan and Bartholomew? The ones who wrote the code? I thought I heard—" "Oh, that court," Jack said dismissively. "Nobody remembers that court. What's important is who's a pirate lord now. For instance, me." "Well, I'd be honored to sail with you, Captain," Henry said, "if you'll have me." He offered his hand to Jack, and Jack shook it, looking extremely pleased with himself. "Certainly," he said. "I always trust a man with a good firm handshake like that. We be Pirates!" boomed a voice from the doorway. A surprisingly short, bearded man stood framed in the light from outside, decked out in a well-worn leather coat with fountains of Spanish lace at his throat and cuffs. His wide-brimmed hat was adorned with feathers, and his weathered brown skin indicated his age, as did the streaks of gray in his black-bearded mustache. "Vagabonds! Men of the sea!" he bellowed. Jack scowled. He would recognize that lilting foreign accent anywhere. It was the Spanish pirate Lord Villanueva. He dropped Henry's hand and rose to his feet. "Ahoy there, Captain Noisy," he said. "Some of us are trying to conduct business in here. Civilized business, with no shouting." Villanueva ignored him. "I am in need of a few strong men for my crew," he said. Two very large, very burly pirates stepped up behind him and crossed their arms. Jack started examining his dirty nails with deep interest. The Spanish pirate lord drew his sword. "You," he said, pointing with it to a well-muscled sailor near the door. "And you. And you." He selected a few more of the strongest, least smelly, most sober candidates. Then he paused and looked around. His gaze fell on Jack's little gathering. He gave a small, sinister laugh. "And you," he said, pointing his sword tip directly at Henry's squidgy midsection. "You can't have him. He's mine, I say," Jack protested. "I did agree to," Henry began weakly. The Spaniard poked him lightly in the belly. "I said you," Villanueva declared with finality. "Out! The Centurion is leaving now." The other pirates who had been chosen stood and began to file out of the bar without arguing. Henry gave Jack a helpless look. Jack was debating whether to start a sword fight with Villanueva right there in the tavern when the Spaniard's two burly companions stepped forward and loomed menacingly over him. "Ah, well," Jack said to Henry, "it was a terrific partnership while it lasted, and I hear the weather is lovely in Spain." One of the big pirates firmly took Henry's arm and escorted him from the room. Villanueva tipped his hat to Jack with a sardonic smile and sauntered out, taking all the best pirates in the room with him. "And that," Barbossa said pointedly to Jack, "is how it's done." He took a swig from one of the tankards of ale that the barkeeper had brought them. "Typical arrogant Spaniards," Jack observed, sitting down again. "As if the East India Trading Company is in trouble enough. Now we have to deal with the regular Spanish Navy everywhere, and Spanish pirates as well." He shook his head mournfully. "Why can't the Caribbean just be full of mermaids and vengeful ghosts and shape-shifting sorceresses? I ask you. Those I know how to deal with." He reached for his glass and discovered it was empty. "Hey, why is the rum gone?" Billy carefully didn't look at Catastrophe Shane, who hiccuped innocently. "You were right not to start a fight with them," Billy said. "Villanueva would chase you all the way around the world if he thought you'd offended him or taken something he wanted." "He'd never catch the pearl," Jack said jauntily. "Well, it's not all bad news." He clapped Shane on the back. "At least we have Catastrophe Shane." So we then go back aboard the Pearl, where Jack and Barbossa are watching the incompetence of Catastrophe Shane. He definitely lives up to his name, as he pretty much cannot do anything right. But Jack feels a cold sensation creep over him, and when he tells Barbossa, I love how Barbossa asks if he is feeling poorly, and if so, if he's feeling deathly poorly. Barbossa is so ready to be rid of Jack, and we just started this series. Jack tells Barbossa to set course for North Carolina while he goes to his cabin. This cold sensation that creeped over him is starting to freak him out, as it now feels like there is a weight on his chest, making him almost unable to breathe. He then senses something move in the corner of the cabin, but Jack sees nothing but shadows. But these shadows continue to pester Jack, and as he gets more and more infuriated, someone knocks on the door, and Jack opens it to see Billy on the other side. Billy tells him that he was concerned by all the noise they heard from inside the cabin, but Jack tells him he was just making plans. Even still, Jack feels like there are shadows watching him, and he makes the assumption that he has been cursed. And to figure this out, he needs to go see Tia Dalma, so he changes course for the Pantano River. Billy does not know yet that Jack has changed course, but Jack knows he will eventually figure it out. To evade the situation, Jack makes his way down into the hold and busies himself with inspecting the cargo. As he makes his way through the dark space, the shadows continue to pester him. But something more physical moves behind him, and not too long after, he hears a familiar voice manifest out of nowhere. So let's go back into the book. "Jack," whispered a voice in his head. "Oh, no you don't," Jack said forcefully. "It isn't bad enough that I'm seeing things, I have to hear them too? Enough muttering, shadows. Out of my head." "Witty Jack, I be not one of your shadows." Jack frowned. Only one person called him Witty Jack. "Tia Dalma?" he said. "Clever, clever Jack." "Well, this is convenient," Jack said. "You being in my head and all. I was just on my way to see you. Very obliging of you to turn up here instead. Go ahead and appear if you like. You know you're always welcome here. Within reason." "No, Jack. It is best you come in to see me. I have tings to show you. Tings you must see and do." "Madam, I don't do tings for anybody but myself," Jack pointed out. "This definitely be for yourself, Witty Jack." "Ah," Jack said. "Well, in that case, not a problem. We'll be there in a heartbeat. Some supernatural winds will be helpful if you'd like to contribute." "I be not at the Pantano River bayou, Witty Jack. The glittering city awaits you. Go there and seek me upriver." What? Jack protested, irritated. Why can't you just be where I want to find you? Why do I have to solve a riddle to get there? Why can't you just come here? Jack, the world is not always arranged for your liking alone. So what's the glittering city then? Jack said. He thought for a moment. Last glittering city I saw was New Orleans. Of course, it was glittering because it was made of silver, which some say was my fault, which it was, a little, well, a lot my fault, but I fixed it, so I don't see what they're going on about. No response from the voice in his head. New Orleans? Jack guessed sheepishly. See you soon, witty Jack. I'll take that as a yes, then, Jack said. The voice did not speak again. He shook his head, batting away the invisible creatures that were tugging at his hair and trying to steal his excellent hat. I'll have you know, Jack said pointedly to his tormentors, you dread fiends of the dark, that I am not afraid of you, not even remotely. You see, unlike Dalma, I know that you don't really exist, so... As he spoke, he reached behind him to see if there were any rum bottles in the cubby holes along the wall, and then his hand hit something warm and alive. Something that said, Madre de Dios! Ah! Jack howled, launching himself to his feet. You are real, Jack shouted, spinning and flailing at the darkness. I knew it! Scoundrel! Cur! I'll have your bones for earrings. Or, no, that would be rather disgusting and not at all attractive. Stand and fight! He wrestled with his sword, but was caught in one of the crates. Please, senor, please forgive me, the other voice cried. Boots thundered down the stairs, and several pirates charged into the hold, waving torches and lanterns. The bright glow of the light fell on a boy cowering in front of Jack. He was young, probably 16, about the age Jack had been when he set out on his first adventures aboard the Barnacle. His dark hair was disheveled and matted with straw. His eyes were brown, wide, and frightened, and his thin brown hands were clasped abjectly over his head. What in the 7 seas are you? Jack said. You don't look like a dread beastie. A stowaway, Barbossa sneered. Throw him overboard. Lo siento, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, senor. The boy threw his arms around one of Jack's boots and pressed his head to Jack's foot. I needed help. No say, I didn't know what else to do. Well, wrinkling my boots isn't the best way to start, Jack said, stepping back. The boy stayed crouched against the floor of the ship. Aren't you Spanish? Jack asked. You sound awfully Spanish. Si, yes, I am, the boy said. I am Diego de Leon. I recently escaped from the fort of San Agustin in Florida. A runaway and a stowaway, Barbossa spat. Sounds like my kind of lad, Jack observed. Barbossa scowled. You're not related to me, are you? Jack asked the boy suspiciously. No, senor. Please, por favor, please help me, Diego said, holding out his hands to Jack. My friend who escaped with me has been recaptured by the Spanish. I knew only a ship like this could catch them, and only a capitan like you could lead a successful rescue mission. Well, Jack said, stroking his mustache and preening, that is probably true. We're pirates, Barbossa reminded him acidly. Not bleeding heart do-gooder Robin Hood hero types. We don't do rescues. That is true, too, Jack said with a nod. But she needs your help, Diego pleaded. She? Jack questioned. Carolina. She was only 15. They were going to marry her off to the governor, a very cruel old man. Diego added a volley of colorful Spanish curses. She had to run away, and I had to help her. Rescuing her from such a fate would be an act worthy of the noble Captain Jack Sparrow. Ooh, Jack said. The noble Captain Jack Sparrow. I like that. He shook his head. But my first mate is right, lad. We're pirates, not a rescue party, and we have places to be. Yes, about that, Billy Turner interjected. But tell you what, Jack went on quickly. We'll drop you at the nearest island, and perhaps someone there can help you. What do you say? Diego buried his head in his hands despairingly. It will be too late, he said. Carolina will be lost forever. Look on the bright side, Jack said, patting the boy's head awkwardly. Maybe this cruel old governor won't want her any more after she ran away like that. Not exactly an auspicious start to the marriage, after all. Maybe they'll just lock her in a nice cell instead. Diego sighed. No, her family will make sure the marriage happens. That's what they're carrying all that gold for. There was a breathless pause as every pirate in the hold perked up his ears. Gold? Jack said casually. See, Diego said without looking up. Chests and chests of Spanish doubloons, jewels, handcrafted swords, whatever it takes. They're determined to marry her off and get her out of the family's way so she won't be any more trouble to them. He muttered something else in Spanish. Jack said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. You know, Diego, I believe I've just had a change of heart. Diego raised his tear-streaked face, looking hopeful. Yes, Jack said. You're right. The noble Captain Jack Sparrow can't just sit idly by and let this fine young lady, sail off to her doom. Clearly, we must go after the young lady. He clapped his hands together and rubbed them, grinning. It's only right and proper. Crew, trim the jib, man the helm. We've got some rescuing to do. So we found out first that Dalma is waiting for Jack in New Orleans, and also the mysterious stowaway from earlier is a young boy named Diego de Leon. He needs help in rescuing his friend, Carolina. We'll learn more about her and Diego in a bit, but for now, Jack changes course again to chase after this ship. We then see later on that Billy has figured out that they are no longer sailing in the direction of North Carolina, and Jack tells him they have a damsel in distress they need to save first. But Billy tells him he knew they weren't sailing toward North Carolina even before they found Diego, and Jack tries to pass it off as if he wasn't involved in that decision. But Billy asks if Jack will take him home after they rescue Carolina, and Jack simply says, "Of course," before going over to talk to Barbossa. Billy only sighs and knows deep down he's not getting home anytime soon. Jack asks Diego if the ship off in the distance is the one carrying Carolina, and Diego confirms it is. So Jack readies the Pearl for battle as they sail closer. We then go to that night where the crew of the Pearl is waiting for the battle to start. Barbossa asks how they're going to do this, and Jack tells him they're going to do this his way. He tells the crew to be completely silent and douse all the lanterns, and the crew does as they are told. Diego tells them the Spanish on board the ship are talking about some grand plan where the Spanish will succeed in controlling the entire Caribbean, and Jack is confused by this. But as they get ready, Jack tells them they will pull alongside and sneak aboard and surprise them. But Jack then forgets about Catastrophe Shane, who is currently armed, and begins to fire off his pistol wildly. Jack shouts for someone to take his pistol away, but by now the Spanish know they are there, so Jack and the crew swing over and begin to fight with the Spanish on board. While they fight, Diego runs around looking for Carolina, and he finds her not as a damsel in distress, but looking like a pirate who happened to just capture the captain of the Spanish ship. We see that Carolina is not a lady, per se, as she despises dresses and used the one she was given to tie the captain's hands together. Once the Spanish surrender, Barbossa and a few other pirates go down to find the gold, and Diego introduces Jack to Carolina. Carolina has long black hair, and as I said earlier, is currently wearing trousers and a shirt to disguise herself as a boy. Jack notices the look on Diego's face as he looks at her, which Carolina doesn't notice. He obviously knows now why Diego wanted them to help rescue Carolina. But Diego then escorts Carolina aboard the Pearl, and we see Carolina is overjoyed at the fact that she is on board a pirate ship. She hopes that Jack will let them stay with them, but she tells Diego she wants to be treated as just a member of the crew and not as a Spanish princess. And yes, she is a princess. She was betrothed to a governor, as we found out earlier, and Carolina refers to this guy as El Cruel, and she ran away to get away from him and the marriage. But as the Pearl's crew brings the gold aboard, Diego and Carolina notice a ship on the horizon, and it is Villanueva's ship, the Centurion. Diego goes and alerts Jack about this, and Jack, of course, decides to do what he does best, which is running away. Barbossa wants to fight, but he is overruled by his captain, who changes course to New Orleans. Billy is annoyed at this, since Jack promised they would be heading for North Carolina next, but Jack says it's just a quick stop before they take him home. Barbossa wants to get rid of Diego and Carolina, but they tell Jack they will share information with him if he lets them stay. So, Jack agrees to this and lets them stay aboard. Carolina then tells Jack that Villanueva is allied with the Spanish, and he is working with them so he can retire into Spanish aristocracy one day. They are planning to take over the entirety of the Caribbean and divide it up between them. While Jack ponders all of this, the Pearl heads to New Orleans, and as they make their way into the harbor, Jack and Barbossa get ready to see Dalma. But we get another reunion with an old friend here, so let's go see who it is. The city glittered in the distance as they sailed closer, although not as much, of course, as it had glittered when it was made entirely of silver. "I'm counting on you, Billy, old chap," Jack said, pulling his friend close. The wind tugged at his long hair, but he knew it wasn't just the wind. It was the strange shadows lurking in the corner of his vision as well. He needed to get rid of them as quickly as possible, before he went truly mad. "It's up to you to keep an eye on the Pearl and the crew while they stagger about spending their ill-gotten loot. My advice is to get them as drunk as possible. That should keep them busy while Barbossa and I go see Dalma." "I don't trust that mystic," Billy said. "I don't know why you need to see her." "Ah, she's not so bad," Jack said, ruffling Billy's hair. "We go way back. Old friends. I'm sure she'll be delighted to see me. Probably forgotten all about last time. I don't think she's the type to hold a grudge." "Say, Jack," Barbossa said, joining them at the bow with an apple in his hand. You know, I could stay with the Pearl instead. Wouldn't be any trouble. Happy to keep an eye on her for you." He winked and took a large bite of the apple. "Quite all right," Jack said breezily. "Billy can handle it. And remember, it's Captain Jack." He tapped Barbossa lightly on the nose and swiped the apple from him. Barbossa scowled and stalked away, muttering something about mangy bilge rats. The Black Pearl sailed grandly into the port, and Jack remembered his visit to the town long ago when he was captain of the Barnacle. Now, things were very different. Now he had a whole crew and a ship to be reckoned with, not to mention a quite excellent hat. He blinked and rubbed his eyes. Was he seeing things again? "John, mate!" he called down as the Pearl dropped anchor. A freckled, green-eyed young man with curly red-brown hair looked up from the line he was tying to the dock. "Jack!" he cried in delight, smiling broadly. "Captain Jack," Jack reminded him, waving. "Of course." Jean Magliore said brightly, "Captain Jack." John had been one of the first crew members Jack ever had, back when there were just a handful of them sailing the Barnacle around the Caribbean. Jack hadn't seen him in years. Jack didn't even have to offer a place to board the Pearl. John was anxious to leave the ship he was working on. "The captain is so boring, Jack," he said as they stood together on the dock, watching the hustle and bustle of ships loading and unloading around them. "You'd barely even know he was there. Not one grand adventure in all the time I've been with him. Not a single ghost or mermaid trying to kill us. Not one cursed amulet turning things to bronze. I'm afraid once you sail with Captain Jack Sparrow, nothing else quite measures up. You sure you have room for me on the Pearl?" Jack beamed. "Absolutely," he said. "Especially now that you don't have that dreadful feline Constance following you around anymore. I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but I quite loathed her." "Oh, you've always made that much perfectly clear, Jack," John said. "None, mon ami. My sister is back in human form and having a very normal human life, finally." "Excellent," Jack said. "Then you're welcome to come aboard." "But," John said nervously. No buts," Jack said, waving his hands. "I do have one tiny problem," John said. "That is, not really a problem, more like a companion, a duty kind of. I mean, she has nowhere else to go, so I'm kind of responsible for her." "Oh no," Jack said, burying his head in his hands. "She won't be a bother," John assured him. "It's my, cousin, Marcella, you see. She's been, orphaned, and she needs a protector, so that's me, and, oh, Jack, say you don't mind. She won't be any trouble at all. She's only a brat to me, really, I'm sure." "I heard that!" Jack and John rolled around. A skinny girl stood on the dock behind them with her hands on her hips, glaring at John. She looked about the same age as Carolina, more elegantly dressed in a long gray gown, but not half so pretty. Jack blinked and rubbed his face. Her eyes looked brown, but then they looked yellow when she turned her head. Yellow eyes? His curse must have been making him see things again. "John," Marcella said, stamping her foot, "I am not a brat. I'm not. You must stop saying things like that. It's mean and it's not fair." "I'm sorry," John said penitently. "Listen, I'm getting us a place in this fine ship here. Isn't that splendid?" Marcella's gaze swept over the Black Pearl from one end to another. She wrinkled her nose. "It looks like a pirate ship," she said disapprovingly, as if the Jolly Roger at the top didn't make that obvious. "And so it is, love," Jack said. "The fastest, most glorious pirate ship ever to sail the seven seas." The girl gave him the same long, considering gaze she'd given the ship, and her expression of disapproval didn't change. "Hey, wait," she said. "You look like... Aren't you... Jack?" Jack was startled. Surely he'd never seen this young lady before in his life. John said quickly. "Give us a moment, Jack." He seized Marcella's arm and drew her away behind a stack of crates while he talked quickly in French. Jack gave Diego and Carolina a puzzled look as they came down the gangplank, admiring the busy madness of New Orleans. "No chance one of you speaks French, is there?" Jack asked. They shook their heads. "No, that'd be far too useful. All right, forget it. Carry on." He sidled closer to the crates as the Spanish pair walked away, but he couldn't make out anything John was saying. He could hear Marcella stamping her foot and saying "none" every now and then. That was rather worrisome. Not exactly what he was looking for in a new crew member. Meanwhile, Barbossa was preparing a longboat to sail up the river. "This is madness, Jack," he said, stacking flasks of fresh water in the boat. "You don't even know where we're going. Just upriver, you said. What type of direction is that?" "Never fear, Hector," Jack said expansively. "These things tend to work out in the end." "Yes, for you and nobody else," Barbossa muttered. John reemerged, dragging Marcella behind him. "It's all settled," he said happily. "Marcella agrees this will be a great opportunity for us." "If she did agree, you certainly couldn't tell from the look on her face." Jack said. "Well then, welcome aboard, I suppose." Barbossa scowled at Marcella. "Another woman?" he said. "I suppose our luck can't get much worse." Marcella turned up her nose at him. "I assure you, dirty man," she said, "that it most certainly can." She marched up the gangplank, her skirts flouncing. "Oh dear," John said, rubbing his head. "We'll be off then," Jack said quickly. "You settle in and take care of all that. We'll be back in 2 shakes of a feather. He jumped in the boat with Barbossa. Never understood that phrase myself, he said, settling down in the front of the boat and leaving the seat with the oars for his first mate. Why would anyone be shaking feathers to tell time? It's quite mysterious. He stared at Barbossa's feathered hat and raised an eyebrow. Barbossa, realizing that he was going to be rowing all the way upriver until they found Tia Dalma, looked as if he was going to say something rather angry, but he narrowed his eyes, held his tongue, and sat down to row. One day things would change, but now was not the time. The boat set off, weaving between the larger ships until it came to the wide, rushing waters of the Mississippi River. As they moved steadily upstream, Jack studied the banks from below the rim of his hat. His chest was beginning to ache again with the pain and weight of the shadow illness. He needed a cure as soon as possible. Tia Dalma was his only hope. Alright, so Jean is back, and we also see that with him is his cousin, Marcella, who happens to have yellow eyes, which is interesting. She also already knows Jack, as she recognizes him immediately, but Jack does not know who she is. John also mentioned that Constance was transformed back into a human, which is also interesting. I wonder what's up with that. I'll let you ponder this here. But Jack wakes up and realizes that he is still in the rowboat with Barbossa heading upriver. But what is interesting is that the boat is moving itself, turning and making its way up the river. Darkness begins to set in, and Barbossa lights a lantern so they can see. They then see an eerie green light up ahead, and the boat sails toward it. When they get closer, they see the green light is coming from a lantern attached to an old pier. The boat stops once it reaches the pier, and Jack and Barbossa get out of the boat and walk down the pier onto a path leading them through the trees and eventually into a clearing. Barbossa notices they are in a graveyard, and not too long after, Tia Dalma manifests nearby. "Always so clever, witty Jack," Tia Dalma purred in her mesmerizing voice. "It has been too long since I saw you last." The mystic was leaning against one of the trees across the cemetery. Jack wasn't sure if she'd been there all along or if she had just materialized. She had a way of doing that. She looked simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, as always, and the strange patterns tattooed upon her face almost seemed to dance in the shadows. Her large, uncanny eyes studied Jack, the flames flickering in their depths more than a reflection of the lantern's light. "A shadow has been laid upon you, Jack." "That part I know," Jack said. "What I want to know is how to lay it off." "Yes," Tia Dalma said. She took a step forward, and the silver crab necklace around her neck gleamed in the moonlight. "This is a new enemy you be facing, Jack." "A new one?" Jack said, outraged. "What did I ever do to him? Or her? Him? Do I owe them money? This doesn't have anything to do with that bar wench in Port Royal, does it? Because I have no idea how I already met her sister. She might have mentioned Sss. Tia Dalma hissed, staring into the distance and raising her hands as if she could see something floating in the air. Jack fell silent, squinting to try and see what she saw. "You be not so familiar with him, but him know you very well," Tia Dalma said. She lowered her voice to an ominous whisper. "Him, the Shadow Lord." As she said the last words, the clearing seemed to get darker, and a chilly wind swept across the tombstones, trailing skeletal leaves. Jack hoped he was only imagining the sound of thunder in the distance. A rainy trip back to New Orleans after a creepy mystical session wasn't exactly how he wanted to spend the night. "Oh? And what's this Shadow Lord when he's at home?" Jack asked. "A master of darkness and shadows," Tia Dalma said. "All right," Jack said. "I probably could have figured that bit out myself. What does he want with me?" "Him be looking for this," Tia Dalma said. Making a strange gesture, she revealed something small in her hand that glowed, a pale, shimmering gold. Jack had no idea what it was, but he knew right away that he wanted it. It was beautiful. "What is it?" Barbossa asked intently. Jack jumped. He'd forgotten that his first mate was there. "Shadow gold," Tia Dalma whispered. "Made by the Shadow Lord." She held it out, and Jack stepped carefully around the graves to get a closer look at it. The object in her hand was a small glass vial with a tiny cork keeping it closed. The golden glow came from the liquid inside. "Him a lord of alchemy," Tia Dalma said, tilting the vial so the liquid slid slowly back and forth. "Him wish to be lord, no, king, of much more." "Pretty," Jack said casually. "I'd like a better look, though." He reached for the vial, and quick as a wink, the mystic snapped it into her fist and held it out of his range. "The Shadow Lord is very angry," she said in a husky voice. 7 vials of shadow gold there be left in the world, and all of them stolen from him not so long ago." She gave Jack a searching look. "Wasn't me, love," Jack protested. "For once I can say it wasn't me. Definitely not. That I can recall, I'm pretty sure. Reasonably sure. More or less." "I know," Tia Dalma said calmly. "It was I who took them." Jack stared at her, open-mouthed. Well, that's not fair, is it? Why is he after me, then? Why isn't he after you, who's got the nightmares and the tugging and the nasty beastie things slithering out of the shadows? Him not know of me, Dalma said. Dat be why we meet here, where him cannot see. She indicated the graveyard with her free hand. And it is not only you who he hunts. It is all the pirate lords. Oh, Jack said, somewhat mollified. Well, as long as they're all suffering. So far, only you, Dalma said. He is biding him time, raising him shadow army. Couldn't him bide him time without cursing me? Jack objected. He paused. And please, tell me you didn't just say shadow army. An army that rises from darkness and returns to darkness, Dalma said in a voice like a building storm. An army that cannot be fought, cannot be stopped, cannot show mercy. An army unlike any ever has seen before. Well then, Jack said, perhaps I'll just pop back to the Pearl, find a quiet corner of the world the Shadow Lord isn't interested in, and stay there until he's quite finished. Nowhere is safe, Dalma said, shaking her head. The Shadow Lord will not rest until all the 7 seas belong to him, and all the pirate lords are dead. Jack blanched. Well, that's a bit extreme, he said. Why has he got such a problem with the pirate lords? An old, old hatred, Dalma said, and only you can stop him, witty Jack. Ah, Jack said, backing away. No thanks. Lovely offer, but you may have noticed I'm feeling a bit under the weather lately, so if it's all the same to you. Dalma held up the vial of shadow gold again. Here is your cure, witty Jack. Only the shadow gold can chase away your darkness. She closed it in her fist again. But one is not enough. If you want to live, you must find all 7 vials of shadow gold. That should be easy enough, Jack said, since you're the one who took them, eh? Dalma smiled, a smile that was amused and sinister and displeased all at once. Not exactly I, she said, nodding at something behind Jack. A horrible scratching noise was coming from the ground near one of the graves. Jack turned slowly to stare at it. He watched as a decomposing hand emerged from beneath the stone cover of a mausoleum. The hand, attached to a similarly decomposing body, pushed the stone aside and brushed dirt and dust from its clothes. Then the body sat up and climbed to his feet and out of the tomb with awful determination. Barbossa let out a gasp of terror and fled back down the path to the boat. Jack would have happily done the same, only the new thing was standing between Jack and his escape. It was shaped like a man, but it looked like no man Jack had ever seen before, and he'd seen some pretty strange fellows in his time. This one swayed slightly from side to side as he shuffled forward. His eyes might have been brown once, but now they were filmy and clouded, staring fixedly into space. Worst of all, bits of skin and flesh seemed to be dropping off him wherever he moved. Witty Jack, meet Alex, Dalma said softly. My zombie. You've got a zombie? Jack echoed. All the rage among the mystics these days, are they? Alex, him once sail with the Shadow Lord, Dalma said, ignoring Jack's flippancy. She was watching Alex with a hint of pride. Him know more about the Shadow Lord than any man alive. Well, semi-alive, Jack observed, edging away from the zombie as it shuffled closer. So I wakened him, Dalma said, and sent him forth to steal me the shadow gold. The last vials must be kept away from the Shadow Lord, else he finds more horrible things to do with them. And what happened to them? Jack asked. Where are they now? Dalma frowned at Alex. Zombies, they be very obedient, but I'm afraid not so clever. I kept one vial and I told him, take the other 6 vials to the strongest pirate lord. I thought the strongest could protect the vials from the Shadow Lord. Jack searched his pockets, then raised his shoulders quizzically. You must have gotten lost on the way because I never received them. Dalma stared at him and smiled. Jack be witty, Jack be quick, but Jack be strong. I am tinkin' not. Hey, Jack said, ruffled. I'm under a curse here, and am I not still defeating Spanish galleons and finding you in creepy graveyards? You don't see me crawling into a hole and giving up, do you? True, Dalma said with a calculating expression. Perhaps there be more to witty Jack. But the world will never know unless you find the vials. So who'd he give them to, then? Jack asked indignantly. Was it Mistress Cheng? She scares me a little. Or maybe Sri Sambhaji out in India? I doubt it. I hear he has the voice of a 4.5-year-old girl. And tell me it's not Villanueva, that blackguard. No, Dalma said. Alex, him misunderstand somewhat. Him give the vials to more than one pirate lord. Come again? Jack said worriedly. Your compatriots know not what they have, Dalma says. I will use the powers of the seas for this, until one pirate lord can bring them all together. Whoever drinks all the vials, every one of them, Jack, him will be as strong as the Shadow Lord. Really? Jack said, interested now. I like the sound of that. "If you drink this shadow gold, Jack," Tia Dalma said, waving the vial in her hand, "you will be healthy again, for a time. But you must drink them all if you want to live." "All right," Jack said impatiently, holding out his hand. "Hand over the shiny lovely, then." Tia Dalma studied him for another long moment, and then she carefully placed the vial in Jack's outstretched palm. He was surprised at how cold it was. It lay like a bottled moonlight in his hand. Was this a wise decision? He didn't really have a choice. With extreme caution, he pried out the cork. Of course, he wanted to live. Besides, it was pretty. He tipped back the vial and poured the shadow gold down his throat. As the cold trickle of the alchemical metal spread throughout his body, he felt himself becoming more alive than he ever felt before. The weight in his chest melted away, the darkness in his vision vanished, and the air around him was suddenly still instead of plagued by moving shadows. He felt a wild energy surge through him. It was like the first time he stood at the bow of the Pearl, captain of his own ship, free as the wind. He felt as if he could run on water, leap off mountains, battle any sea monster. Yes, he would definitely search for the other vials. He wanted this feeling to last forever. He blinked and realized there was another change. He could see in the dark. The forest around the graveyard, previously full of shifting shadows and dangerous unknowns, was now clear as day to him. The gleaming eyes belonged to small night mammals, not ferocious beasts. Nothing was lurking to pop out at him. Nothing but Alex, of course. But even he didn't look so terrifying through Jack's new eyes. Upon closer inspection, the look on his decomposing face was actually a bit goofy. Not that Jack was getting any closer, of course. The zombie still exuded a rather strong smell. "One question," he said to Tia Dalma. "If you're such an all-fired powerful mystic, why can't you just summon the vials back here right now?" He waggled his hand in the air. "You know, poof and all that." "If I could do that," Tia Dalma said, "I'd never have to leave my shack, would I, witty Jack?" "A nifty power, eh?" Jack mused. "But not one I possess at the moment," Tia Dalma said with an ominous glint in her eye. "All right, so where are these magical life-saving vials, then?" "That would be telling," Tia Dalma responded with a coquettish smile. "Why, yes, it would be telling," Jack said, nodding in agreement. "It would be very useful telling. We'd quite like that much telling, instead of all this not telling and mysterious gobbledygook, madam." "I think you already have the knowledge you need, witty Jack," Tia Dalma said. "But I will tell you one thing more. There was a vial going to Villanueva, but I stopped Alex in time. This shadow gold was sidetracked into safer hands. You might start by looking for it in South America." "South America?" Jack said. "What, the whole continent? Care to narrow that down for me?" Tia Dalma shook her head, looking mysterious as usual. "This might help," she said, reaching into a side pocket and pulling out a handful of knotted string. Jack took it from her and peered at it, holding it at different angles to see if it would turn into something informative. Nope, still just a bunch of knotted string. "Wow, string," he said blankly. "It is a quipu," Tia Dalma said. "Quipu," Jack repeated. Splendid. Always wanted a quipu. And is the, string going to help?" "Do you want it or not?" Tia Dalma said fiercely. "Oh, it's lovely," he said, quickly tucking into his coat. "Thanks very much." "And you'll be taking Alex with you," Tia Dalma added, taking the zombie's shoulders and pointing him at Jack. "Follow witty Jack, Alex." "Hang on," Jack said. "No, don't follow witty Jack. I don't need a fellow losing bits and pieces of himself all over my ship. For one thing, it's messy, and what's more, bad for morale. Nobody wants the bloke in the next hammock over suddenly dropping his arm on the floor in the middle of the night. Very unsettling." "Him will be my eyes and ears with you," Tia Dalma said. "Him know all there is to know about the Shadow Lord. Also, him was a barber surgeon once. Perhaps him could be useful." Jack raised his eyebrows at the big, rotting hands hanging loosely at the ends of Alex's arms. "No offense, mate, but you're not shaving me," he said. "Go now, Jack," Tia Dalma said. "Find the Shadow Gold among your brethren. Then return, strong, to stop the Shadow Lord and his Shadow Army." So after this, Tia Dalma vanishes, and Jack reluctantly takes Alex back to the rowboat, where Barbossa is trying to untie the knot holding it to the dock. Jack tells him Alex will be joining them, and Barbossa is creeped out at first. I just want to bring up the fact that Barbossa ran away scared when Alex emerged from the grave. I just find that hilarious. Anyway, they begin to sail back down the river, and they make their way through an area surrounded by tobacco fields. Jack decides not to tell his crew about the Shadow Lord and the fact he needs to drink the Shadow Gold, but Barbossa smells smoke nearby, and they see a nearby tobacco plantation is on fire. So let's go back into the book and see what happens here. "Tobacco plantation on fire," he observed. "Pity. Waste of good tobacco." He cupped one hand around his ear and listened intently. Shouts and rifle shots echoed from across the field. Jack's expression became serious. He could tell there was a slave revolt underway. Jack valued freedom above all else and felt strongly about slavery. He first parted ways with the East India Trading Company when he liberated some of what they saw as cargo, and he saw as human beings. "Look there," Barbossa said, pointing. "Someone's coming." A tall, well-muscled figure was running through the long grass as fast as his legs could carry him. His ebony skin gleamed in the early morning light, and his strong arms swept the reeds aside with a long pitchfork. He had a look of great determination and the speed of a leopard. The crew could hear dogs baying in pursuit behind him. All at once he spotted Jack standing up in the boat. He changed course instantly, pounding directly toward them. In moments he had charged through the long reeds and was splashing into the river. Without stopping to ask permission, he gripped the sides of the boat in his powerful hands and hauled himself in. Gasping for breath and dripping with river water, he collapsed onto the boards at the bottom of the boat between Jack and Alex. Barbossa's lip curled disapprovingly. "Now this is the last straw," he said. "Girls and zombies are one thing, but escaped slaves? Surely you're too sensible to get mixed up in that kind of thing, Jack. Throw him overboard." Jack sat down, flicking his coat back. "Row, Alex," he commanded firmly. "Row as hard, as fast as you can." Alex obediently started to row harder and faster, leaning into the oars with all his weight. The boat fairly flew through the water, and soon the howls of the hounds and the smoke from the burning tobacco fields were far behind them. Barbossa was too outraged to speak. He folded his arms and sat glaringly, but Jack ignored him. "Thank you," the fugitive said sincerely to Jack, pressing one hand to his chest as he recovered his breath. His voice was deep and melodious. Water slid down his strong arms and dripped into small puddles in the bottom of the boat. "I do not know how to repay you or show you the extent of my gratitude. You have given me my freedom." "And by your leave, may I ask what you are planning to do with that freedom?" Jack asked. "I do not know," the man answered. "My master will search for me. I will have to keep running until I am far enough away to escape him forever." "Oh, yes?" Jack said. "I happen to know a great vehicle for running away. It's called a pirate ship." The stranger's eyes lit up. "You would take me with you?" Jack offered his hand. "Captain Jack Sparrow," he said. "Know anything about ships or sailing, do you?" "I can learn fast," the man said, "and my master always said I was a good cook." Now it was Jack's turn to light up. "Just the thing we need," he said with delight. "See, Barbossa, this was a lucky break for us after all." Barbossa continued to glare at them. "What's your name, my good man?" Jack asked. "Gombo," the man replied. "That is what I have always been called, ever since they brought me here. I remember no other name." "Gombo," Jack echoed. "Well then, Gombo, welcome to the crew of the Black Pearl." So one thing is consistent with The Price of Freedom, and that is Jack's hatred of slavery. He doesn't even give helping the slave a second thought, and I love seeing this part of Jack's character return. We find out the slave's name is Gombo, and Jack brings him aboard the crew. Make sure to remember Gombo for the time being. We'll learn more about him later. When Jack, Barbossa, Gombo, and Alex return to the Pearl, they find Catastrophe Shane tied to the mast so he can't mess anything else up. But Jack is annoyed because someone is in his cabin, and that someone is Marcella. John tells Jack that she doesn't want to sleep in a hammock with a bunch of pirates, and Carolina scoffs at this, saying that Marcella shouldn't be sailing with them in the first place. This is the start of Carolina and Marcella's rivalry, which we will see a lot of over the course of this series. Marcella gets angry enough that she comes out of the cabin to argue, and Carolina mentions that she is a Spanish princess, which everyone is surprised to hear. But Jack takes the opportunity to run into his cabin, and he closes the door on Marcella's face. Once he is inside, he notices that Marcella tried to redecorate the room, and Jack sees odd scratch marks on the arms of the couch. Very interesting. So Jack fixes everything in the room, and a few hours later, someone knocks on the door, and Jack sees that it is Billy. Billy tells him it is nice to see John again, but he notices they are no longer sailing in the direction of North Carolina. Jack tells him they have to make one more stop before they take him home, and to distract Billy, he pulls out the quipu that Tia Dalma gave him. They don't know what it is right now, but Alex tells Jack the Pearl is coming up on Panama. According to Alex, the Shadow Lord hates Panama and he did terrible things there. Up in the crow's nest, Diego and Carolina notice a ship is following them, so they tell Jack. He shrugs it off for now, but Marcella is angry again with the quality of the food. Yes, Gombo and Marcella are also going to have a rivalry going on as well. But the smell is more so coming from the coast of Panama, and the crew looks on at the devastation before them. The fort is destroyed, and its walls have crumbled, the town is destroyed, and all across the beach and throughout the remains of the town lay dozens of corpses that at first aren't even recognizable as bodies. Everyone is horrified at the sight before them, but now the severity of the Shadow Lord and his power is known to them, especially to Jack. And Jack feels the curse come back too, and he then calls a meeting to discuss the Kipu. So back in the book, Jack says, "All right, men, and you," he added to Carolina. He dropped the Kipu on the large round table in his cabin. It was the next morning, and the sun shone brightly through his windows, but it couldn't chase away the nightmares that had plagued him all night. It was time to get to the bottom of things. What is this wretched thingy, and what does it do? Diego, Carolina, Billy, and Barbossa all leaned in to study it. The knotted string lay on the table in an innocent, unreadable tangle. Carolina reached out and poked it. Like any string, it did not react. "Looks like string, sir," she said with a straight face, "with knots in it." "Thank you for your brilliant observation," Jack said. "What does it do, and how will it help me find the shadow gold?" Diego picked it up and rubbed the knots between his finger and thumb. "Maybe you have to do something to it," he suggested. "Like get it wet?" Jack picked up a pitcher from the table and promptly poured water all over the Kipu. Upon reflection, he realized he probably should have moved the maps and everything first. Billy and Diego scrambled to mop up and save the parchments as Jack lifted the Kipu again and squinted at it. "Ah, yes," he said knowingly. "Now it looks like wet string." He gave Carolina a sardonic look, "with knots in it." "Perhaps you have to wear it," Carolina offered. "Or eat it," Barbossa said. "Or I know, use it to strangle yourself with." The others looked at him, and he made an innocent face. "What? I thought we were brainstorming." Jack took off his beloved hat and gingerly put the Kipu on his head, on top of the red bandana he always wore. Water dripped down to his ears, and judging from the way Diego and Carolina were smothering giggles, he looked perfectly ridiculous. "You must be supernatural," he said to the Kipu, taking it off and shaking it in his hand. "Why would a mystic give me a bunch of string? Not that Tia Dalma is always the most lucid dame, but surely it has to do something." A piercing shriek came from the other side of the cabin door, followed by a few loud crashes, some shouts, and finally an ominous splash. Jack looked at Barbossa. Barbossa looked at Jack. They both looked at Billy. "I'll just go check on that," Billy said. But before he got to the door, it opened. John leaped in and slammed it shut behind him. "Nothing. Don't worry," he said quickly, pressing his back to the door. "It's all under control." "Let me guess," Jack said, pressing his hands together and pointing them at John. "Our darling Marcella has had another tantrum." John winced. "Gombo asked her to swab the deck. He said she should at least contribute to some things around here if she was going to eat so much of the food he cooks." Carolina hid a grin. "Unfortunate phrasing," she pointed out. "You have no idea," John said. "So there was a bit of a quarrel, but it's all right now." Jack sat up straight. "She didn't throw Gombo overboard, did she?" he asked. "I won't be pleased if she did. We'd only turn around for a cook that good and my hat." Seeing Billy's expression, he added, "Oh, and for you too, mate. Absolutely." He winked at Barbossa, who only frowned in reply. No, John said. "Not Gombo. Only the swabbing mop and bucket." Jack said. "Delightful." "Hey," John said, suddenly spotting what they'd been looking at. "What are you doing with a Kipu?" He walked over to the table and picked up the discarded string. "And why is it all wet?" "Never mind that," Jack said. "You know what this is?" "Of course," John said. "It's for sending messages. The pattern of knots spells out the message, so it can be carried back and forth without being read, because only a few people know how. I heard the Mayans talking about them when I was in Tuman's village. Of course, the Mayans think their alphabet is far superior." "Superior to what?" Jack asked. "Don't you know?" John said. "The people who use Quipus. The Incas." "Ah, yes," Jack said, furrowing his brow and looking knowledgeable. "The Incas." "Who are the Incas?" Billy asked. "Oh, come now. Everybody knows the Incas, mate," Jack said. "Go on, John. Tell him." "They live in the mountains of South America," John said. "They used to be very powerful before the Spanish came." Jack nodded sagely. "Obviously. Well, that clears things up." He stood up, grinning. "The Incas have my shadow gold, and I'm going to get it back." So the Pearl sails for South America, where they dock near the coast. John tells him that the Incas live in the Andes, and he points out the location on the map. So with a plan in mind, the crew goes ashore, leaving Billy and Catastrophe Shane to guard the ship. Diego notices footprints in the sand, and they lead to a path through the jungle. Gombo goes and scouts up ahead, and he returns and tells him there's a Spanish fort up ahead. Jack doesn't want to get involved in any side excursions, but Barbossa offers to check it out, so Jack agrees to split up. Diego, Gombo, and to their dismay, Marcella go with Barbossa to check out the fort. We see that Marcella is very into Diego, and wants to go wherever he goes. This quickly, though, gets on Diego's nerves, and Jack then takes John and Carolina with him. After about an hour, Jack deduces this was not the best plan, and I love how Carolina says, "What plan? Pick a continent and just start walking?" But when Jack pulls out the quipu again, he walks forward and falls into a large hole in the ground. He looks around and sees it is a network of tunnels and beckons for them to join him. The quipu then begins to shine with a silver light, getting brighter when he begins to make his way down one of the paths. They walk for a while before they emerge out onto the surface again. It also happens to be sunrise, even though it was midday when they entered the tunnels. But they aren't alone. As Jack notices, they have found the Incas. But the Incas are not very happy to see them. We then go over to Barbossa and the rest of the crew as they plan out how to attack the fort. They make a plan in mind, and we then go and see how they execute it. So inside the fort, the Spanish soldiers are playing a game, but they hear knocking on the door. So let's go see what happens. "Was that knocking?" asked Bartana, one of the card players. "I could almost swear I heard knocking." "And shouting, maybe?" mused Salamanca. "Out here in the jungle?" Ruiz scoffed. "Who could it be?" "Villanueva?" Salamanca guessed placidly. He dropped a card on the table, and the captain scooped it up. "A day early?" Bartana said, scratching his nose. "That doesn't seem like him. No matter how excited he is about the gold we're holding for him." "Well, who else in this godforsaken wilderness knows we're here?" Ruiz challenged. "The ones looking for that princess," the captain pointed out, laying down a card. "We got word to keep an eye out for her. They have no idea where she's vanished to." "Yeah," said Fernando. "I'm sure there's a princess knocking at the gate right now." "I guess you better go and find out," the captain said, nodding at Ruiz. "Why me?" Fernando protested. "Why not one of them?" He jerked his thumb at the other two soldiers, who were of equally low rank. "Because you lost the last round," the captain said calmly, "and because you're the only one who's going to bother anyway." Cursing roundly, Fernando shoved his chair back from the table, slapped his cards down, and stormed out into the courtyard. The knocking at the gate sounded less like knocking now and more like someone throwing big rocks at the doors. He slid open the eye hole and peered out. His jaw dropped in shock. An angry girl stood outside the gate, her hands on her hips, scowling. She saw his eyes appear in the slot, and her face lit up. He quickly slammed the slot shut again. Was he seeing things? Had 5 months in the jungle finally driven him mad? Or was it possible that an escaped Spanish princess really was standing right outside the gate of his fort, knocking? She didn't look Spanish, but you couldn't always tell. His mind instantly filled with thoughts of the giant reward that had been offered, and while she was waiting for the ship to take her home, perhaps he could teach her to flamenco dance. He slid open the slot and discovered the girl's face was still on the other side. Startled, he jumped back, and she stuck her tongue out at him. He rethought his flamenco dancing idea. Just the reward would be sufficient. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Gibber, jabber, gibber," she said, or at least that's what it sounded like to him. He guessed she was speaking French. "Are you not the Spanish princess?" he asked, disappointed. Surely if she was, she'd be speaking Spanish like him. "Gibber, jabber," she yelled. "Blah, blah, blah." She smacked the door and stamped her foot. He didn't need to speak French to figure out she was demanding to be let inside. Well, what harm could that do? Perhaps one of the other soldiers could figure out what she was saying. And it wasn't as if one lost girl could be any threat to the fort. He signaled to her to wait, and then he went to the mechanism that opened the gate. With loud creaks and groans, the portcullis went up and the doors swung open. Marcella marched inside, looking pleased with herself and very haughty. Although her bedraggled gown did not match her regal demeanor, Fernando found himself bowing gallantly anyway. He straightened up to find a pistol in his face. "Surprise," Barbossa said with a wolfish smile. "Thanks ever so much for inviting us in." He clubbed the soldier over the head, and Fernando passed out on the yard's cobblestones. Behind Barbossa, Gombo frowned. "Let's try to do this with minimum bloodshed," he said. "We'll need the Spanish government any angrier at the pearl than it already is." "Stupid princess," Marcella said, tossing her head. "I wish we could get rid of her and just keep Diego." "Speaking of Diego, where is he?" Gombo said, glancing around. "He should have been inside by now. We watched him scale the wall at the back." "Oh, I hope he's all right," Marcella said, clasping her hands. "I couldn't believe how bravely he climbed those steep stones, using only a few edges for footholds. I so hope nothing terrible has happened to him." Gombo rolled his eyes. "It is not such an amazing trick, climbing a stone wall," he said gruffly. "Well, I didn't see you volunteering," Marcella snapped. "I don't speak Spanish," Gombo reminded her. "I could not gather information the way he could by eavesdropping before we got in." "Exactly," Marcella said. "Just one reason why he's a hero and you're not." They glowered at each other. "I'm here," Diego said, appearing in the low doorway at the inner building of the fort. He had a sword pointed at the Spanish soldier, who was gaping at the four intruders in astonishment. "His friends are tied up in there." Diego nodded behind him. "And this gentleman has kindly agreed to show us the office where they're storing the gold for Villanueva." Barbossa's eyebrows arched. "Villanueva?" he said. "There's gold for him here?" "So I overheard," Diego said. "A whole chest of it. His deal with the Spanish must be going well." He nudged the soldier with his sword. "Take us to the gold," he said in Spanish. The soldier nodded, blinking, and led the way inside. Marcella flounced ahead of Gombo, and Barbossa brought up the rear, training his pistol in all directions. But the fort was quiet. They met only 2 other soldiers on the way to the office, and those were easily taken care of by tying them up and stuffing them into a closet. It seemed that Diego was right. Most of them were peacefully enjoying their afternoon naps. "Here," the soldier stammered to Diego in Spanish, stopping at one of the doors. "This is the commander's office. He has sailed out to meet Villanueva and bring him back here. They should return tomorrow." "Gracias," Diego said to him. "And in exchange for your help, I will help you as well." He leaned toward the soldier and whispered, "I have heard a rumor about the Spanish princess everyone's been looking for." "Princesa Carolina?" the soldier said eagerly. Marcella caught the name Carolina and looked up with a scowl. "Yes," Diego said, still in Spanish. "I have heard she took passage on a ship bound for Ireland. It left 2 days ago, but it was supposed to stop in New York, Boston, Maine, Canada, and Greenland along the way. If they want to find her, they should start by looking at all those places." The soldier nodded, repeating the cities as he tried to memorize them. "Nueva York, Boston. Yes, thank you, good sir. They will reward me well for this information." His face fell. "That is, after they punish us for allowing the fort to be robbed in the first place." Diego felt a twinge of guilt, but it was worth it to throw Carolina's family off her trail. "Sorry, my friend," he said. Gombo took the soldier inside, tied him up, and sat him gently down the floor of another closet to await rescue. As they opened the door to the commander's office, Gombo tilted his head at Diego. "I didn't understand what most of you said to the man," he said, "but you did something clever, didn't you?" "I hope so," Diego said fervently. "I would do anything to protect Carolina." He didn't notice Marcella's face darken angrily. The office was small and square with only one window high up in the wall. There was a heavy oak desk, a pair of plain cabinets, a map of the Caribbean hanging on the wall, and one very large chest which looked very promising. Barbossa pushed past them and hurried to the chest. It wasn't even locked. They really must have thought no one would find the fort out in the jungle. He flung open the top, and the crew was downright awed at the sight of the gleaming pile of coins inside. The whole room seemed to be lit up by them. Gombo peeked out into the passageway and closed the door. "Quickly now," Barbossa said. "Let's seize the gold and get out of here." He chuckled, rubbing his hands together. "I wouldn't like to be this commander when Villanueva arrives and finds he's not getting paid for his deceitful, black-hearted schemes." "I don't know why you're so outraged by that," Marcella said, plopping herself on the edge of the desk and swinging her feet. "I mean, he's a pirate. Of course he's deceitful and black-hearted. What did you expect? You're all like that, aren't you?" Barbossa drew himself up with proud fury. "Most certainly not," he said. "Deceitful and black-hearted perhaps we are, but we would never go against the code. Well, perhaps for good reasons, but mostly never." "What code?" Marcella asked. Rummaging in one of the cabinets, Gombo found a couple of canvas sacks. He passed one to Diego, and they began to fill them with gold coins as Barbossa strode from one end of the office to the other, explaining intently. "The code was set down by the Brethren Court many, many years ago," Barbossa said. "What's a Brethren Court?" Marcella interrupted. She spotted a bowl of candy on the commander's desk and seized it, stuffing some into her mouth. Barbossa took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring. "The Brethren Court is composed of the 9 pirate lords, the greatest pirates in all the 7 seas," he said, then paused. "And also Jack." "Jack's a pirate lord?" Marcella mumbled around a mouthful of candy. "Somehow," Barbossa muttered darkly. "Most likely through some typical Jack trickery, or luck. He has an uncommon amount of that, too. We'll see how long that lasts." Diego and Gombo exchanged glances, but the first mate didn't notice. "At any rate," Barbossa went on, "the second Brethren Court drew up the pirate code. 2 of the pirate lords, Morgan and Bartholomew, figured it out and wrote it down, and that's what we've all ever lived by since." He shook his head. "I don't know what the world is coming to, pirates tied in with the army against other pirates. Have they no honor? Have they no pride? Can't they just steal our treasure and raid our ships without telling the Spanish commanders that they do it? It isn't right, I say." Marcella shrugged. "Still sounds all the same to me." Barbossa seemed to realize who he was speaking to. "Lasses, always useless," he muttered. So as they fill the sacks with gold, Diego sees a letter on the desk and reads it. He realizes that it is from the Shadow Lord, addressed to the Spanish admiral, asking for an alliance along with a ship. He also mentions he is in an excellent position to betray one of the pirate lords right now. Diego decides not to keep the letter, knowing that if he took it, the Spanish would know they are aware of what's going on. So he leaves it on the desk and the crew makes their way out of the fort with all the gold. But before Marcella leaves, she writes a quick note on a piece of paper that reads, "I know where you can find your precious Princess Carolina. She is on the Black Pearl. Come and get her." After this, we go back over to Jack, Jean, and Carolina. So we go back into the book here, and the Incan priest says, "How dare you interrupt the sun ceremony?" the man demanded. It was astonishingly how quickly he leaped down the large stone stairs to confront them, especially since he looked to be about 100 years old, judging by the vast system of wrinkles covering his face and his mane of silver hair. "Who are you? How did you get here?" His sharp brown eyes, bulging from under his unusually high forehead, darted among them. "You speak English," Jack said, surprised. "That worked out rather well, then, apart from the spear, which we would rather you point in a different direction." "I'm not speaking English," the priest said. "You're speaking Quechua. Look, mate, I think I would know if I were—" Jack started, then looked down at the quipu in his hand. "Oh, are you doing that too?" The ancient Inca's face softened when he saw the quipu. "Ah," he said, "I see." He leaned his golden spear against the closest stone wall and took the string reverently from Jack, running the knots through his fingers. With a smile, he said, "Tia Dalma, my old friend. Then you must be here for the shadow gold." Jack was delighted. "I am indeed," he said. "I am the legendary Captain Jack Sparrow. I assume you've heard of me." "No," the Inca said, "but Tia Dalma's servant asked us to safeguard the gold until she sent us one who would need it, and I can see from the thick cover of shadow around you that you are he." Jack shrugged, trying to hide his uneasiness. Was it really so obvious? "Well, thank you for looking after it," he said. "Lovely of you. I hope they're all this easy." "I don't know if I would say easy," the priest said. "It's up there." He turned and pointed to a tiny mountain that rose up at the far end of the city, climbing into the clouds above the mountain peaks that surrounded it. When Jack squinted, he could see a set of horrifyingly steep stone stairs carved into the side of the mountain, leading all the way to a small temple right at the very top. "Why am I not surprised?" he said. "Of course there would be climbing." He clapped John on the back. "Looks like an excellent job for you, John. Good luck and all that. Hurry back." "Figures," John said ruefully. "I'll get it," Carolina jumped in. "Let me. I'll run right at the top. I swear I can." "No," the Incan said, shaking his head. "You must retrieve it yourself, Captain. That is Tia Dalma's instruction." "Bossy wench," Jack said indignantly. Then he sighed. Well, at least he'd have a chance to drink the shadow gold before anyone could stop him. The other inhabitants of the city followed Jack and his crew to the base of the mountain where the steps began. The wind was stronger there, and would certainly be stronger still at the top where the temple was. Jack took off his hat and handed it reverently to Carolina. "Do you solemnly swear to take very good care of this hat?" he asked her. "I will," she said earnestly. "Or else I will leave you here when the ship sails," he said. "And who knows what might happen then? That llama looks mighty hungry," he said, gesturing to the animal slumped droopily over the altar. "Trust me," she said, holding onto the hat tightly. "I will not let anything happen to it." "Good," Jack said. He shook John's hand. "Back in a moment. Don't have too much fun without me." Jack resolutely started up the steps. At first, they slanted up like a normal staircase, but before long they became narrower and shorter and steeper, and soon he felt as if he were climbing straight up a vertical wall, as if he could fall right off the mountain if he only tipped backward a little bit. Beside the steps were patches of grass and rocks, occasionally broken by an odd statue or a flash of fur that might have been a chinchilla or an alpaca bounding away. Jack tried not to look around too much after one very unwise glance downward. He was lucky the clouds hid the ground far below, but just the fact that they were so far below him was unsettling enough. He clambered quickly, and the air turned chilly. He was glad he had his long coat on. He began to use his arms as well as his legs to pull himself up, although everything soon began to ache. He tried to tell himself that this was not so different from ascending up to the crow's nest, and he reminded himself of all the years he had spent clambering up ratlines and scampering up masts while dreaming of captaining his own ship. After a long while his hands suddenly touched open air, and he looked up, realizing that he had reached the top. The temple stood before him, open to the sky. He pulled himself up and collapsed on the cold floor slabs, catching his breath. At one end of the temple stood a curved stone altar with hollows carved in it. Resting in a hollow at the top, exactly in the path of the rising sun so that rays of light shone directly on it, was the shimmering vial of shadow gold. His heart pounding with excitement, Jack scrambled to his feet and hurried over to it. He reached out to take it, and a sword came down, barely missing his hand and ricocheting off the stone altar with a ringing metallic sound. Startled, Jack leaped back and beheld his attacker. It was the pirate lord Villanueva. "I see you're after my gold," he said in a menacing voice. Jack blinked at him. "Hang on. How did you get up here?" he asked. "I have my ways," Villanueva said mysteriously. Jack looked around the temple, the isolated mountaintop, and the long stretch of steep stone stairs behind him. "No, seriously," he said. "How did you get up here?" Villanueva looked irritated. "There's an easier path on that side," he said, waving his sword toward the far side of the mountain. "A llama brought me up." "Well, that is unjust," Jack said. "Someone might have mentioned that easier path to me. I think I'll blame Marcella. Been looking for a reason to toss her off the crew." "The point is," Villanueva said firmly, determined to get back to sounding menacing, "that you are trying to steal my gold." "Your gold?" Jack echoed. "And what makes it yours, mate? Looks like it's just sitting there for me to take." He lunged for the vial, and Villanueva brought his sword up sharply, stopping him. Jack drew his own sword and stepped back, balancing lightly on his feet. "I know it was meant for me," Villanueva said. "My old rival Cheval said that Mistress Ching has one of these vials, and I suspect he has one as well. He was gloating about it, said the best pirate lords have them, which means this one must have been intended for me before it went astray." "Perhaps it was meant for me," Jack suggested. Villanueva sneered. "I doubt that very much." He took a step toward the altar, and Jack deftly parried, striking the older man's sword aside and driving him backward. "You don't even know what it is," Jack said, lunging and slashing. "It's just some old shiny stuff, probably cursed. I'd be doing you a favor taking it off your hands." Villanueva dodged and slashed back. The crash and clang of swords echoed around the mountains. "No one knows what it is," Villanueva said with a spinning side swipe. "We only know that it is beautiful, and we want it." Despite his short stature and hefty bulk, the Spanish pirate was a very accomplished swordsman, nearly as skilled as Jack himself. "Ah, that's logical," Jack said, darting aside. "That's pirates," Villanueva responded with a shrug, and Jack certainly couldn't argue with that. He jumped back from a sharp thrust and found himself teetering at the edge of a cliff. Windmilling his arms frantically, he was able to regain his balance, but Villanueva was already striding toward the vial. "No!" Jack cried. "My shiny stuff!" He sprang forward, somersaulting through the air, and landed on the altar as Villanueva reached it. Quickly, Jack grabbed the vial, but Villanueva's hand wrapped around his before he could open it. Their hands locked together. They pulled, yanking the vial back and forth with furious force. Jack nearly fell off the altar, but finally he kicked Villanueva in the gut. With a grunt of pain, the Spanish pirate lord let go and staggered back, clutching his stomach. Jack immediately pulled the cork off the top of the vial and poured the shadow gold into his mouth. As he swallowed, he felt the warmth and the pale gold energy flood through him once more. This time it felt even more powerful and intense than before. He felt rejuvenated, whole, healthy. He felt as if he could rise up and fly straight into the sun, which was beaming down on him as he stood on the altar. Villanueva was sputtering in disbelief. What did you drank it!" he cried. "Why would you do that? You are mad, out of your mind, lunatic. It was beautiful. Now it's gone." "Gone to a better place," Jack said cheerily. He jumped down from the altar and bowed deeply to Villanueva. "Excellent fight. Great to see you. Let's catch up again some other time. Or never. That would be fine as well." He bounded over the steps and began to jump lightly down them, 2 at a time. A few steps down, he paused and called back to Villanueva. "Oh, by the way, working with the Spanish, Villanueva? Don't you think it's a bit low, even for you?" Laughing to himself at the Spaniard's astonished expression, Jack continued down the mountain, feeling like he had wings on his feet. This shadow gold was amazing. If just 2 vials made him feel this fantastic, he couldn't wait to see what happened when he found the third. Alright, so once Jack makes it back down the mountain, he shows John and Carolina that he got the vial, although he doesn't let them see that it is empty. Jack asks the priest where they should go next, and the man gives Jack his golden spear. He tells him that it has the power of the sun god Inti in it. The spear leads them back through the tunnels, and they make it back to where they entered, noticing that barely any time had actually passed since they originally entered it. But they quickly notice the Spanish are on their tail, so Jack and the crew run back to the Pearl. Once they make it to the beach, they see the Pearl is already ready to go. Obviously, Barbossa was ready to leave Jack behind, but it didn't work out for him this time. Jack, John, and Carolina get aboard and begin to make sail. Diego and Carolina share a sweet moment here, but Marcella interrupts and wants Diego to help her with a spyglass. But Diego notices that the ship from earlier is still following them. Jack decides to sail to the islands up ahead to try and lose them, but what Jack originally thought was 2 islands was actually 1 island in a crescent shape. So now the Pearl is trapped, and the incoming ship makes its way toward them. The crew gets ready for battle, but Diego notices the ship is waving a white flag. So let's see what happens here. "Captain Sparrow," Diego said, peering through the spyglass again. "Look at this." Jack aimed the spyglass at the other ship. He saw a man with dark skin standing at the bow, waving a white flag. "They wanted parley." "That's odd," Jack said. "They chased us a long way just to have a chat." "I say we blow them out of the water," Barbossa snarled. "Of course you do," Jack said dismissively. "Billy, Wave the white flag back. Let's hear what they have to say. Barbossa stomped off, grumbling, as Jack and Billy held up the white flag, signaling their agreement to meet peacefully. Jack sent Alex and the others to drop the anchor, and they waited as the other ships slowly sailed up beside them. "Hello," the man at the bow called. Several other men gathered by the rail beside him. They all had gleaming black skin and strong muscles. "We are looking for someone, and we believe he is aboard your ship." "Marcus?" said a voice behind Jack. Jack turned and saw Gombo climbing up beside him. The cook was blinking in disbelief, and a great smile began to spread across his face. "Marcus, you escaped! You all did! The gods be praised!" "Thanks to you," Marcus called back. "Gombo, we burned the plantation, stole his ship, and came looking for you. We want you to be our captain." "Oh, too bad, mates," Jack interjected. "I'm afraid he's already got a job. As our cook, I'm sure he wouldn't want to give that up." "Me?" Gombo said in surprise, ignoring Jack. "Are you sure? You want me to be captain of the Ranger?" "We know you'd be a better captain and a better leader than our former master," Marcus responded. "You were the one who led us to freedom. You're a hero, sir. We couldn't serve under anyone else. That's why we've been chasing you all this time. We thought we'd never catch you." Gombo took a deep breath. The bright whiteness of his enormous smile seemed to light up the lowering dusk. "I would be honored to be your captain," he said, and a great cheer went up from the escaped slaves on the other ship. "Are you sure you'd rather be a captain than stay here with us and cook that magnificent jambalaya?" Jack asked wistfully. Gombo smiled knowingly. "Thank you, Captain Sparrow," Gombo said, taking Jack's hand and shaking it warmly. "I won't forget how you helped me." "Well, if you must go, word of advice," Jack said, leading closer, with a wise expression on his face. "You can't be a captain with a name like Gombo. Lacks a certain dignity, if you will. Makes a fellow hungry, not terrified. Savvy?" He narrowed his eyes and nodded meaningfully. "I will take his name," Gombo said with a steely resolve. "My former master's. He stole my life, my name, my identity, my family. Now I will take his. No one shall remember who he was. There will only be one Gentleman Jocard, and it is I." Jack and the rest of the crew stood at the rail, waving goodbye as Captain Jocard was rowed to his ship by his enthusiastic crew. Jack felt a pang of jealousy. He wished he had a crew that would follow him across the whole Caribbean trying to get him to be their captain. Pirates. They never knew what was good for them. "Good riddance," Marcella said petulantly, crossing her arms. "He didn't even say goodbye. Pirates." "Remarkable," Billy said. "Gentleman Jocard, newest pirate in the Caribbean." "Yes," Jack said. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing him again." Alright, so the big reveal here at the end is that Gombo is none other than Gentleman Jocard, the pirate lord of the Atlantic Ocean. This is super cool and awesome to learn about Jocard's backstory and how he becomes, well, Gentleman Jocard. He will return later in the series, so stay tuned for that. But later that night, Jack and the crew are in his cabin figuring out where to go next. Billy, of course, wants to go to North Carolina, but Jack needs the next vial of shadow gold, and that is held by Mistress Ching. So Jack sets the Pearl's course for Asia. Then we have a quick epilogue where we see the Shadow Lord reading a letter from the Spanish Admiral who has accepted the alliance proposed by the Shadow Lord. And we see that he is currently on a ship and planning his next steps. Once the Pirate Lords are defeated, that's only the beginning of the Shadow Lord's master plan to take control over the seas. But that is the end of Book 1 of Legends of the Brethren Court. Next up is Book 2, named Rising in the East. This one is one of my favorites in the series, and I cannot wait to cover it. We'll see Mistress Ching, Sao Fang, and even the East India Trading Company will get involved in this Shadow Lord business. I hope you join me then, and for now, I hope you enjoyed this episode and the beginning of our journey through Legends of the Brethren Court. I hope to help make this series a bit more well known, and if you enjoyed this episode, consider reading the actual book and the rest of the series. As with all of these episodes covering the books, there are parts I have to leave out, so please read the whole book if you want the full experience. But for now, thank you for listening, thank you for rating or reviewing if you've been kind enough to do so, and I will see you all next time for Book 2, Rising in the East. Take care. Podcast of the Caribbean is in no way affiliated with Disney. If you want to send me an email or a question, you can send it over to podcastofthecaribbean@gmail.com. You can also follow this podcast on Instagram and Threads at Podcast of the Caribbean, and over on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at PodcastPOTC. I post fun content and trivia, so make sure to check those platforms out. And you can also buy merchandise for the podcast over on Dashery. Be sure to keep a weather eye on the horizon, and always remember, dead men tell no tales.